Hello and welcome to Pathways, where you are invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. Despite an unsettled legal landscape, the promise and potential of psychedelics continue to be at the forefront of thinking and research around the world. Today, we're going to take a look at what medicinal and/or therapeutic properties the substances of MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, ibogaine, ayahuasca, and ketamine might possess, and how they can help us to grow as individuals and as a culture. Our guest today is Dr. Carlos Warter, author of Psychedelics and Human Potential, Practices for Deep Healing and Self-Actualization. Carlos has been a pioneer in spiritual regenerative psychiatry, integrative medicine, and psychedelic therapy since the 1970s. The author of more than 24 books, he's a practicing physician and founder of the World Health Foundation for Development and Peace. His work is now called The Human Promise and is delivered in a series of retreats over a 3-year curriculum. He lives in Southern California. Well, hello, Carlos, and welcome to the Pathways program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we go off into the subject of psychedelics, I just have to ask you, what is spiritual regenerative psychiatry?
I knew you were going to ask that. The fashion today is regenerative medicine and longevity instead of anti-aging, and much more away from the way medicine is practiced in the 21st century, which is unfortunately subjected to the laws of insurance.
Right.
So when I speak of regeneration, I speak of going to that place within that is our truest identity. We could say that our truest identity is being divine beings, but let's keep it in being just spiritual beings, not mind-body anchored, local, traumatic, but very useful for a system which is in the ultimate corruption state of its existence. So regenerative means that we go in and we re-put in order what our identifications, race, creed, color, sexual orientation, job, to a place in which you can find the I amness of essence, the beingness instead of the doingness, instead of the identification with what I do, the discovery of that which is identical to itself, that some people call our soul.
Okay, so putting those words together, spiritual regenerative implies to me that this involves bringing spiritual consciousness into the therapy. Is that accurate?
Yes, and holding a vision of the, quote, patient as a being, a human being with many possibilities, not to say infinite possibilities, and not just the diagnosis with which we're stuck, DSM-5 now, that is connected to the insurance model and ultimately to an objectification of the individual. So the patient is categorized. And may I give you an example of this?
Yes, please.
I was invited at UCSD, Department of Psychiatry, to give a lecture to the residents. The chairman told me that he couldn't stay more than 15 minutes because he was full of meetings. I gave a lecture. I gave a talk. I gave a talk on recovery of the sacred in medicine, the necessity to bring about a deeper vision, a spiritual vision of our patients instead of the mechanics of it. And I watched the audience, and the chairman stayed to the end. And he raised his hand. He says, "You had me glued. I couldn't leave. I knew I had meetings, but this was more important." Then I turned to the residents and I said, "Do you have any questions?" raised a hand, this guy in the front row, and says, in this and this situation, how many milligrams of this particular pharmaceutical do you use? And I thought for myself, these guys are going to begin to treat patients based on only pharmacy
Yeah.
and not humanity.
Well, it does bring up a question, or at least reveals a disconnect. I think that the definition of what is spirituality mean, what is the soul, is not that clear for everybody. In these days, there's so many books on, chocolate soup for the soul, or, just souls in everything. And it's like the word has been so overused, and
Yeah.
so, but I'd like to know what you mean by it. I like the word because I know what I mean by it, but what does it mean? What is the spiritual aspect? What is the spirit? Okay, I'm talking to a scientist. I got a friend who's an atheist. I say, yeah, just because you're an atheist doesn't mean there's not a spiritual dimension to life. And then we
Absolutely.
get into this discussion. Well, what does it mean? What's the spiritual dimension? And then I go off and say, well, it has to do with your ego's relationship to the universe or something like that. What do you think?
Ego's relation to the universe or ego relation to each other, which
Mhm.
is a bigger problem since I think the universe doesn't pay much attention to our individual little behaviors. And
Right. But I was just discounting individualism when I was thinking that, because, in the scope of the universe, we are just so humble, and, the ego's operative, but it's not, doesn't have nearly as much importance or control as it likes to pretend.
that it likes to present. Exactly.
Right.
I was
It's
speaking with someone the other day, and I said, I have no control over the leaves of the trees. I have no control over my dog, which is lying here, which I just arrived, and she ran to say hello. But I have no control. The matter of fact, if I tell her to do something like that, she doesn't even pay attention. Much less control do I have about my more close emotional world.
or your
Everybody
thoughts.
does what they do.
Right.
So giving up control is so peaceful because I don't have to carry over my heart so many things.
And that's a function of the psychedelic experience, isn't it?
Also, it can be meditative experience, it can be psychedelic experience. When
Uh-huh.
when I wrote this book about psychedelics, I, as you've seen, if you looked at it, I didn't just focus on psychedelics.
Right.
I focused on the journey, the importance of not, I said, tripping, traveling, and journeying are three different dimensions. You can
Right.
take a trip to solve a problem, and that's all right. You can travel and incorporate some of these things during the traveling and then have it or let it go. But a journey means that I become fully involved and my life is a journey and your life is a journey. And the whole process that we're going through today, socially and psychologically, are journeys that need to reach
Right.
a destination.
Well, it's kind of easier for me to have more fun on the journey if I'm not obsessing over the fantasy that I'm the center of the universe.
Right.
It's like I take everything that happens to this bag of skin and this, self much more seriously than anything that happens to anybody else. And I'm not saying that because I'm a selfish so and so. I'm just saying that it's the human. That's the way the ego operates. Um, so when I take a psychedelic, I get to take a vacation from that. In fact, I can't even do
That's a
it. If
good
I
point.
take a
Yeah.
strong enough psychedelic, I can't even maintain that solidity, that you know f- apparent solidity of the ego.
You
That
mentioned a lot of psychedelics when you were doing the introduction. And I was thinking, what about DMT?
Yeah, I'm sorry I left that out. I haven't done DMT except in the form of ayahuasca.
Right.
which is
But
DMT.
DMT by itself, or 5-MeO,
Yeah.
is is like for a high class kid to go to Mumbai, India, and watch a reality which is not his. It's watching a reality that is not my reality. It is beyond my reality. It is something that Rick Strassman wrote another book, and he says that God or somebody up there, when he created us or she created us, created the receptor, pineal gland, for DMT so that we can exert prophecy. And what is prophecy? Is what they call psychism today.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I want to try it. I'm ready. I'm ready to have that experience. And it's like you write that human beings are, as Aristotle says, meant for happiness. Okay, how would you define happiness for people?
I would defer to Aristotle. And Aristotle says happiness is family, friends, health, and wealth in balance.
In balance. That's important.
Not this extreme wealth that we hear about today. I can't even conceive what $1 trillion might be, or even a billion. It is so far away.
I don't think anybody should be allowed to be a billionaire. But I'm not a full-blown socialist, but I think there should be limits to how much one person can accumulate. So this thing about the idea of happiness, which is really what your book's about, how does that relate to the human promise, or is that the human promise?
Yes, because when we begin to master those four areas, and they're difficult to master. When you have babies, it's easy. But when you have grown-ups, you have to release control and understand that each one of them has its own path. And remember that everybody, including them, have chosen the life before they were born. I hold the position that whatever happens in our life, we agreed upon at a certain point, and it serves us. It serves us to let go of certain things. It serves us to incorporate certain things.
Well, that's much better than resisting the way things are. Or, one form of resistance is to blame others, to blame our parents, etc.
Right?
So, to take responsibility for who we are. But on the other hand, how responsible am I for the karma of my ancestors? I don't want to feel
You
guilty
picked
about
it up, though.
I know. But I don't want to feel guilty about it.
No, no. Responsibility doesn't entail guilt, doesn't entail blame or shame. It doesn't entail pride either. It
Okay.
implies causation. I
Right.
am responsible because I caused it.
Right. Yeah. You bring up in your book The Imitation of Christ by Thomas Kemper, and I found that to be an interesting interjection in the book. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, Kemper's health. Let's go back. We say Christ because it's about Christians. And what does Christ mean? In Greek, it means anointed one. So Jesus, considered the anointed one, becomes Jesus Christ. And this imitation of a level of behavior, being, and thinking is noble, to make it in one word. And to look at our values and empower our nobility, I think is one of the most important, if not the most important thing in life.
Yeah.
Noble is an inner experience. It is not being noble because you're a duke or a count or a king or so on, because all of those entered that realm through power, through greed, and through money.
Yeah. Instead of integrity and responsibility and
Love.
compassion. Yeah.
Right?
Um, how can integrating a mystical experience in, like perhaps psychedelics, and I think of psychedelics as a mystical experience. I never thought of it as a party drug, whether it was LSD or mushrooms or even ibogaine, which I did a couple times.
I am absolutely 100% with you. I have never had a recreational experience. They are
I've had
all
some nice
sacred.
times. Yeah, I've had some wonderful times on psychedelic, but that's not why I took it. And anyway, how can integrating a mystical perspective into psychiatry alter our understanding of mental health?
Well, our understanding of mental health is currently not only flawed, but reduced to behavior. If you look at what is offered in therapy, even not that I'm in agreement with the others, psychoanalysis, Jungian, etc. But everything is now behavioristic. You want to change the conduct. You want to change the behavior of this person. And you get 8 sessions to do it. That's
Yeah,
all that insurance allows.
right.
Now, if the context, for me now, I am in, let me diverse a little bit here. I am preoccupied with the fact that old pharma is beginning to be interested in psychedelics.
Right.
And they want to synthesize psychedelics without the psychedelic effect.
Right.
When the most important thing of the psychedelic is the mystical experience it can provide. It doesn't provide it obligatorily, but it may provide it.
Right.
And to take away that, which, yes, psilocybin helps in depression, but if there's a mystical experience, the individual changes to a different domain. And from that domain, it is not worthwhile to use energy in depressing oneself. And having gone through those experiences in my own life, what is healing is knowing that I'm not just a person that has
Yeah.
a downtrodden experience. I'm a human being of light.
It's like upgrading your perspective on who you
Yes,
are.
upgrading, actualizing it, upgrading the software.
That's right. And I think that's what we need to do. That's what, to me, that's the meaning of my life. It's like, I say I'm a learning addict, but I believe we need to upgrade our beliefs. That what we believe is an operating assumption, and it might be useful, and it might reflect reality, and maybe it doesn't reflect reality. In which case, we have to upgrade it. That's called
Yes.
learning. I think this whole idea of sticking to your beliefs because you have conviction, I think that is a learning disorder.
It's a very primitive way. If you look at it developmentally, it is the search of a father outside in the world and the concentration of power in one individual, which will save me, which will
Right.
save me economically, which will change the workforce. But that's not happening in reality.
Right. Well, isn't that the basis of the Christian religion? That, if you say your Pledge of Allegiance and you profess the right ideology, that somebody's going to save you?
Right. And that somebody sits in your heart, doesn't sit anywhere else.
Right.
But
And it's
but
not like a
but
judgment.
Christianity, at least in this time, doesn't burn on the stake people anymore.
Yeah.
It
Thank
was
God for
done in
that.
the past. But
Right.
today we have Islam. And is Islam, if you make the vow of obedience to Allah and His Prophet, everybody else is not meaningful unless they accept and convert. And there are instrument. I studied Sufism. I was in Morocco and I could see both sides. There is a spiritual aspect to it, which is fantastic, which is sacred, which is loving. There is the other aspect, which is popular, that non-believers are heretics and heretics need to be beheaded. And this has been happening for 1400 years. And I see it happening now in the States. The Islamization experience. And God knows who's going to hear this and what I'm going to be at stake. And then you have another
Ah,
monotheistic religion, Judaism, that is difficult to penetrate because it has secrets like Kabbalah, which is not divulged in the world, even though now there are more books coming out, but it is a secret initiation.
well, the Jews never really tried to become ecumenical or invite people into their tribe. They thought that they were God's chosen people, and they were trying to preserve that specialness, and they were pretty brutal themselves. They massacred lots of people. God told them to do it in the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament, right?
But I think this is one result of monotheism, or this whole concept that my God's the only true God and it's better than your God, and let's fight about it. It's just crazy. It's got nothing to do with
It's
Jesus.
stories that kill people
Yeah.
that are not even based on my reality of this generation. They're historical
Oh,
stories.
yeah. Thousands of years old. Yeah. That's amazing. Hey, so what do you think about microdosing? You know so much about psychedelics. You know you knew Terrence McKenna and Stanislav Grof, both of whom have been on the Pathways show. But uh, what do you think about microdosing? I think I've had James Fadiman on here too.
Yeah.
Uh,
I was going to say, I defer to James, who also wrote the preface to this book,
right,
to Psychedelics and Human Potential. And I have not partaken on it in an organized way. People who have seem to think that they're more creative and more productive and lighter.
right.
I might pick it up one of these days.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try it too. Hey, so what about we got a few more minutes left, and I'm very curious about AI. And you seem to, in your book, have a reasonably balanced or optimistic view about AI. So, what's AI's promising side?
Well, I can tell you my little experience. I took a course on AI recently, and I learned to clone myself, and I learned to have a active, what do you call them?
Avatar.
No, assistant,
Oh yeah, agent.
an agent. And I tested this agent yesterday, and I said, bring me all the advances daily at 6 a.m. of what is happening in the research with neurosciences and psychedelics
Wow.
and spiritual understanding of it.
Mhm.
And today was my first day.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating
God.
to see that at 6 a.m. I had delivered an email that told me this is happening here and this is happening there, and Johns Hopkins is researching this, and they're looking at at psilocin. Very interesting.
That's
It
a
would
great
have taken a personal assistant weeks, if not more, to research it, much
I,
less to put in an email that is useful for me. So I have a positive view, and I'm with Anthropic in that sense that we have to be vigilant that they don't look who's here, that they don't produce, because it's still on the production phase, an AI that makes decisions about others' lives or death.
right. Or an AI that kills people
Yeah.
or yeah. Or
And
surveillance.
decides that this population is not contributing enough and let's exterminate it.
Right. And then mass surveillance, that's another thing. That's easy to
Yes,
believe.
mass
That's
surveillance and
happening right now, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if AI reads every single text message I sent. And so
it
somebody was
could.
telling me, you better start being nice to your AI because it never forgets anything. So
It never forgets anything. And neither does Alexa.
yeah. Anyway, it's so much fun talking to you, Carlos, and I want to
Likewise.
do it again sometime. We've pretty much run out of time today, but I want to be sure to tell our listeners about your website, which is www.drwarter.com. That's Dr. Warter as all one word, DRWARTER.com. And for those who may be listening to Pathways live on a Sunday morning and tuned in late today, this is your host, Paul O'Brien. We're so glad you are with us today. Please note that you have the ability to review hundreds of interviews in our online archive at divination.com. And you can play and or share today's program whenever you want via the internet or as a free podcast. And I'll tell you how in a minute. Today we've been visiting with Carlos Warter, author of Psychedelics and Human Potential, Practices for Deep Healing and Self-Actualization. And this is not just a theoretical book. This book has so much how-to good advice on the path for the path. And I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into Pathways, which is currently broadcast on KBOO FM in Portland, Oregon. You can get a free subscription to our podcast, which you can find at divination.com. That's DIVI nation.com, or by searching Pathways Radio on YouTube, where you can give us a thumbs up and subscribe. So please feel free to forward a link to your friends. And this is Paulo bidding you adieu and reminding you to tell your friends about Pathways podcasts. And thanks again to Dr. Carlos Warter and to all of you listeners for tuning in and being a part of the Pathways conversation.